Hi there, it's Samantha, and welcome back to Wife Stewardship Podcast. So in today's podcast, we're going to talk about how to get through a divorce part 2. So what I want to do is I want to dive into the first chapter of the book of Esther. We often skip to Esther's heroics, but there is a profound, often overlooked message in the very beginning of the book regarding the end of a royal marriage. Let's talk about Queen Vashti, who was married to King Ahasuerus. At this time, Ahasuerus ruled a staggering empire of 127 provinces, stretching from India to Ethiopia, from the seat of his power in Shushan the palace. In the third year of his reign, the king threw an opulent 180-day feast to flaunt the riches of his glorious kingdom. On the climactic seventh day of the final public banquet, when the king's heart was merry with wine, he issued a fateful command to his 7 chamberlains. He wanted them to bring Queen Vashti before the assembly wearing her royal gown, specifically to show off her beauty to the people and the princes, for she was fair to look on. This command was more than a request. It was a profound act of public objectification and a violation of royal protocol. While the king was reveling with the men, Vashti was hosting her own sanctioned feast for the women in the royal house. When the king's summons arrived, Queen Vashti simply decided not to show. The scripture doesn't record her saying anything back or getting upset. She just simply refused to come. This act of defiance sent the king into a visceral, burning rage because he did not get his way. His advisors, led by Memucan, argued that this wasn't just a domestic spat, but a constitutional crisis that threatened the patriarchal order of the entire empire. They feared that if Queen could defy the king, all women would despise their husbands in their eyes. Because the king felt publicly slighted, he decided to divorce her, permanently banishing her from his presence, and immediately began to search for a new wife better than she. It is important to note that the scripture suggests a shift in the king's perspective once the initial fog of his visceral, burning rage and wine-induced merry heart had lifted. When he did awake, perhaps the next day or even a few days later, he realized the gravity of what he had done in his haste. However, because he had already deferred to his inner circle of learned advisors, that's the 7 princesses of Persia and Media. Now, the situation had moved beyond a simple personal regret. These were the men who knew the times and were experts in law and judgment. Once they argued that Vashti's defiance was a constitutional crisis and an official mandate was sent out across the 127 provinces to ensure all women would honor their husbands, there was no turning back. The decree was finalized according to the laws of Persians and Medes, which could not be altered, effectively sealing the divorce and the permanent banishment of the queen. Now, let's head over to Deuteronomy chapter 21. This profound lesson we draw from this chapter is centered on the concept of God's protection woven directly into the law. These statutes were not arbitrary rules, but functioned as a legal and ethical framework designed to maintain the sanctity of the land and protect the vulnerable. We will focus specifically on the 11 verses through the 14th verses, which addresses humanitarian treatment to women taken as prisoners of war. Verse 11 states, "And seest among the captives a beautiful woman, and haste a desire unto her, that thou wouldest have her to thy wife." This verse acknowledges the human reality of attraction in the high-stakes environment of war. Crucially, the law elevates the situation from potential exploitation to a formal domestic arrangement by mandating marriage rather than unregulated association. Verse 12 continues with, Then thou shalt bring her home to thine house, and she shall shave her head and pare her nails. Bringing her home initiates a period of domestic integration. The physical requirements, shaving her head and paring her nails, act as a symbolic markers of a total change in identity and reunification of her former life. This process also serves as a cooling off period for the soldier, ensuring that his commitment to a legitimate household transcends initial physical attraction. Verse 13 details her mourning. And she shall put the remnant of her captivity from off her, and shall remain in thine house, and bewail her father and her mother a full month. And after that thou shalt go in unto her, and be her husband, and she shall be thy wife. This mandated month of mourning provides the woman space to process her loss and further integrates her into a community before the marriage is finalized, moving her from vulnerable captive to a protected wife. Finally, verse 14 addresses the dissolution of the union. And it shall be, if thou have no delight in her, then thou shalt let her go whither she will. But thou shalt not sell her at all for money. Thou shalt not make merchandise of her, because thou hast humbled her. If the marriage fails, the woman is granted personal freedom and autonomy. The law strictly forbids treating her as commodity or slave, because the husband, by bringing her into this household, has assumed a permanent responsibility for her fair treatment. Now, in both Esther, the 1st chapter, and Deuteronomy, the 21st chapter, the narrative highlights instances where the man has decided he no longer wants his wife and is permitted to let her go. It is undeniably difficult to grasp the full context of why a spouse may no longer desire to be married to you. Such a rejection is deeply painful and can severely impact your self-esteem. However, these scriptures reveal a historical truth. Even in ancient times, individuals were given the choice regarding whether to remain in a marriage. There is no absolute mandate requiring you to stay and endure certain types of treatment. While placing God at the center of a marriage can lead to its success for many, what God has ordained for one person may not be the same for another. Simply put, staying married does not work for everyone. The purpose of these lessons is to help you understand the true nature of God. He is a loving Father who leads and directs your path. Sometimes He may explicitly ask you to leave a situation you are currently in, and other times, when you ask for His permission to leave, He grants you the necessary provision to do so. You are the only one who truly knows the intimate details of your daily life, the weight of the words spoken in your home, and how you're being treated within the confines of your relationship. You possess the unique perspective to discern whether the deep-seated issues in your marriage are fixable through mutual effort and divine intervention, or if the foundation has been irreparably damaged. It is essential to remember that God, in His infinite wisdom and compassion, has provided the option to leave a union when it is no longer valuable or healthy. As we have explored through the lens of scriptural history, from the first divorce decree to the establishment of the new covenant, Jesus brought us both grace and truth to navigate these complex and often antagonizing life transitions. While I am not advocating for or encouraging you to seek a divorce, I want you to take serious note that you are not biblically or spiritually required to stay in condition of suffering or mistreatment. Even within the strictness of the Mosaic law, God mandated a certain level of humanitarian treatment and protection for wives, ensuring they were not treated as mere property or left without autonomy when a union failed. For instance, in Deuteronomy 21, the law protected the dignity of women by forbidding husbands from treating them as merchandise or slaves in the marriage if the marriage lacked delight. This reveals a historical truth. God has always prioritized the protection of the vulnerable over the maintenance of a broken structure. Divorce is not the end of your story. It is a painful comma in a much larger narrative of redemption. In a transition toward a stronger, more redefined, refined version of yourself, supported by a God who is the master of a complete restoration, as Joseph testified in Genesis, the 50th chapter. What may have been meant for evil or resulted from brokenness, God can repurpose for your ultimate good and spiritual development. He is the master weaver, taking the dark threads of your past and the bright threads of his promises to create a tapestry of beauty. Remember, always, that you are God's daughter, and he loves you with unconditional, everlasting love. He will walk you through every transition, providing the necessary provision and peace to move forward. You are truly one of God's favorites, and he is faithful to wipe every tear from your eyes and restore everything that you thought was lost. Lean on him, for he is your secure foundation. Thank you for tuning in to this podcast today. I look forward to teaching you another lesson on next Wednesday at 7 p.m.